Hey guys, welcome back to the Mountain Nights. I'm sure many of you would have heard about the famous peak Matterhorn, right? So basically, Matterhorn is a peak that is between Switzerland and Italy, on the border of Switzerland and Italy. Let's talk about the real Matterhorn and the story of the sequence of events that were involved in first successful summit of Matterhorn. Basically, the first attempt on Matterhorn was made by Amy Corret between 1858 to 59, and it was unsuccessful. And between 1859 to 1861, there were multiple attempts made on Matterhorn. Right now, the interesting part begins in the year 1861 with coming in picture of the Englishman Edward Whymper. Right. Now, Edward Whymper was basically Englishman, and he was an illustrator working in London for a company. Now, the same company commissioned him to go to the Alps and come with some illustrations of the mountains and specifically Alps. Now, being in the Alps, he started doing mountaineering and he developed interest in mountaineering. And after climbing few peaks, his attention fell on the iconic peak that is Matterhorn. Now, he got so obsessed with the Matterhorn that he continued to climb till the first summit was attained. Right. Now, in the year 1861, the Matterhorn was attempted by Englishmen, that is Edward Whymper, along with some guides from Switzerland, from the Italian side. Now, while being in Italy, before going towards the attempt of the Matterhorn, he tried to gather a few more guides from Italy, and he came across a guide by the name Jean Anthony Carroll. Now, let me tell you that in Italy, mountaineering was quite prominent and it was well practiced, and it had a good group of Italian guides, right? Uh, and most of them were Carroll brothers, amongst which the protagonist of the whole Matterhorn story was a guide by the name Jean Anthony Carroll, right? So he tried to hire Jean Anthony Carroll in the beginning, but as per the sources, he didn't like the looks of Jean Anthony Carroll's uncle, and he declined, hiring him. Now, Jean Anthony Carroll, on the same time, was attempting Matterhorn, while Edward Whymper were doing the same. They met on the way in the middle of their route on the Matterhorn, and watching the skills of Jean Anthony Carroll, Edward Whymper tried to convince him, but he failed. Hence, both of them went on their respective paths while attempting the Matterhorn. Both the attempts of these two teams was unsuccessful, and they had to turn back. In the year 1862, once again Edward Whymper came, and this time he attempted twice Matterhorn. Due to some bad weather conditions, this whole attempt was again unsuccessful. Now comes the year 1863. In the year 1863, Edward Whymper was successful in convincing Carroll, and both of them attempted Matterhorn from the Italian side. Now again, it was unsuccessful due to bad weather conditions and other unfavorable conditions on the mountains, and they had to turn back. Now, after 1863 to 1865, there were no attempts on Matterhorn anymore. Now, the major twist comes with the formation of Italian Alpine Club in the year 1865, whose leaders were chosen, namely Quintino Sellas and Felici Giordano. Now, Italians were of the aim that Italians should become the first one to summit Matterhorn, right? So they started working towards the same aim, and they formed a team consisting of all Italian guides, whose leader was Jean Anthony Carroll. Now, Italians were so obsessed with becoming the first one to scale Matterhorn, and they had such a dislike towards the English team, whose main figure was Edward Whymper, that one of the leaders of Italian Alpine Club sent a letter to Quintino Sellas informing him that Edward Whymper is in the town, and before he becomes the first one to summit Matterhorn, it should be the Italians to do the same. Now, Edward Whymper, being in Italy, learnt of the ambitions of Italian Alpine Club, and he learnt of the formation of Italian team. He got really pissed off and restless. Now, in the fury and in rush to become the first one to summit Matterhorn, he began to look for guides in Italy, but was again unsuccessful. On the same day, he left for Switzerland on foot, and he reached Switzerland. And while attempting to look or form a team who could attempt some Matterhorn, he came across a group of Englishmen who were interested in joining him to climb the Matterhorn. Now, some of them had prior mountaineering experience, and one of them was absolutely novice. Right, the team which he formed in Switzerland was namely Lord Francis Douglas, Hadow, who was a novice, another Englishman by the name Charles Hudson, followed by Peter Taugwalder Jr. and Senior, who were basically farmers and worked for extra income as a guide. Now, their main guide was a French guide by the name Michel Croz. So this was the team that Edward Whymper had formed for himself. Now, this was the year 1865, and they left for climbing Matterhorn. Right. At the same time, Italians were doing the same thing, that is climbing of the Matterhorn from the Italian side. Now, when the English team, that is whose leader was Edward Whymper, saw the Italian team climbing from the Italian side, in an attempt to become the first one, like this was the actual attempt, right, to become the first one, Edward Whymper cut himself loose along with the French guide, that is Michel Croz, and they began to rush towards the summit. Now, English team, whose leader was Edward Whymper, becomes the first one to summit the Matterhorn. In the year 1865, 14th of July, the first summit was attained by the English team, and English team became the first one to summit Matterhorn on 14th July 1865. Watching this, the Italian team who was climbing from the Italian side got really disappointed, and they gave up the climb and they turned back. Now, as we all know that descending down is the most trickiest part of any mountaineering expedition. Job is not over till the time you return back to the roadhead or safety, right? Now, when the team, after becoming the first one to summit Matterhorn, began to descend down, now while descending down, the novice Hadow was facing some difficulties, as a result of which the experienced French guide, that is Michel Croz, was helping him, basically by supporting his foot. Now, in this process, Michel Croz took off his attention to support himself on some difficult section. At the same time, what happened is Hadow slips down and knocks off Michel Croz. Now, when this happens, the people attached to the rope, they too get dragged along, and Michel Croz, Hadow, Hudson, along with the Lord Francis Douglas, they get carried down with the force of the people falling. Now, the rope connecting Lord Francis Douglas and Peter Taugwalder got broken, as a result of which all the four people ahead of Peter Taugwalder, they get carried along and they fall down into the void. The only survivor left behind were Peter Taugwalder Jr. Senior and Edward Whymper. The rest of them were nowhere to be found, and they were dead. Soon the victory becomes into a tragedy, and when the team returns down to the base, the search operation was initiated. After this, the Italians who had already returned back, watching the English team on the summit, decided to attempt one more time. So after 2 days, that is on 16th of July 1865, Italians become the second one to summit the Matterhorn from the Italian side. So this is how the story of Matterhorn goes. This particular story of summiting Matterhorn has a lot of lessons for the climbers to learn. According to me, one of the lessons is always climb with people who you know well, those who are well trained, right? Like this is saying, never climb with the strangers, right? Now, if you want to climb with the strangers, at least spend some time where you get to know each other, where you get to understand each other's abilities. And whenever you form a team, do not get too sentimental about it. Understand the risk associated with the overall act, and form a team which has equal level of experience, and the entire team should be well experienced technically as well as physically, right? And according to me, there is one more lesson to be learned from this whole event, that is, mountaineering is not a race, right? Even if you want to make it a race, it's always up to you, but I personally feel mountaineering should be climbed, mountaineering should be done with the ethics and ethos of mountaineering, right? So that's all from my side. I hope you found this particular video interesting. There's a lot to know about this whole story after the bodies were found, but that will become out of the context. But my aim was just to tell you about the summit of the Matterhorn. We'll be back with more such videos. Till then, take care. See you soon.